just to give everybody a refresher, Gray Davis, I just am going to say stuck it to the business community because of the recall and everything in 2004. And he signed a law into action, which was called PAGA, the Private Attorney General Act. And basically, when employers or attorneys wanted to sue employers in the state of California, they would have to go to the Attorney General and make it a class action lawsuit. This piece of legislation actually deputized hundreds of thousands of attorneys to act as a private attorney general and file lawsuits on behalf of employees. And it's really not the majority of these lawsuits, if you look at them, have not been on behalf of employees for wrongdoing. They're used as a modern day mechanism for extortion, just another tax. Since 2004, there's been billions of dollars paid by employers. It's had a negative impact on job expansion. Even the LAO at the budget hearing the other day says there's very minimal job expansion, business expansion, and businesses have left the state. And it's because of PAGA. A huge majority of it is. And the reason why I say that is because California has been labeled the litigation hellhole, or just the most litigated state for several years in a row. And so what it does is that it creates the biggest infraction, I think, that you have with PAGA. Obviously, I am not advocating for anybody who doesn't pay employees wages correctly or overtime or pay employees on time. That is not what this is about. It's about this little known thing in the law, and it's called inaccurate wage statements. So let's just say you guys, for example, you show up to work every day at whatever address your studio is at. Every one of your employees knows how to get to work, to get to the parking lot, go into the building. But then on your paycheck stubs, it's got the P.O. box, which is the mailing address of the business. That is an infraction because your employees don't know that paycheck belongs to you guys, even though it has your name on it. Let's say that it's a infraction to not have the correct company name that's filed with the Secretary of State. So let's just say, for example, I'll use KSI Industries or KS Industries. If it's K.S.I. on the documents of the state, and then they use the logo that's like a circle with KSI in it, that's an infraction. And it's $50 for every infraction for the first infraction, $100 for every second infraction. If you have periods or commas or dashes, silly things on a paycheck stub that gets you in so much trouble. A perfect example is a company that was sued under PAGA, and they operate in 3 different states, and they use Wells Fargo. So they use the Wells Fargo logo, just the stagecoach with the horses running, and it just says Wells Fargo. So if an employee wanted to go cash their check, they would just find a Wells Fargo and go cash their check. But because it didn't have a correct physical address, and you have to keep in mind that the employer did this to help the employees. Like if you had a Bakersfield address and you cashed a check in Wyoming, they may say, it's an out-of-state check. So the employer did this to benefit the employees. That's an infraction. It cost that employer almost $1 million. $1 million. I had another employer that came to us and said, we need help with this. Basically, this particular employer, all the employees would meet at the yard, and then they'd go to several different destinations that weren't like right there on site. And one of the things that the employees had made in the suggestion box is to get an ice machine so that they didn't have to stop and buy ice every day. So the employer installed an ice machine, so that they could go fill up their big, they're like 3-gallon or 5-gallon water jugs and things that they put on the back of their trucks. And so the employer did that. And then there was a litigation, and the attorney said every time when they came in the yard and went and got ice, that should start the clock. When the employer, for years that they've been in business, the clock started when they left the yard. So some employees might come in and load their truck, or some employees might come in and, get ice. Some employees, they come in and stand around. Hey, what are you doing today? Where are you going? Oh, I'm going to 99 and such, or I'm going here. The lawyer said that's all work time because they were on the premises. So after the big settlement of that lawsuit, the employer got rid of the ice machine, and he keeps the gate closed until 6 o'clock. Then he opens it, and then they can come in and start doing their process, which creates morale issues with the employees. They hated it. They don't like that kind of stuff. For instance, if employers are required to give meal rest periods and rest and recovery periods, But if you have different shifts and maybe you come in at 7, but you want to take a break at 9, and your friend comes in at 8 and wants to take a break at 9 with you, that's no longer allowed because they can actually sue you for not complying with the break periods after 2 hours, after 5.5 hours for lunch, and then 2 hours after the lunch period. This has created such an enormous impact on all of our employers. I'm talking billions of dollars with a B, billions of dollars since 2004 have been paid out. The majority of those dollars go to trial lawyers or lawyers that are these PAGA lawyers that attack businesses.
If you want to know how businesses are impacted in California with PAGA law, we actually interviewed a number of business owners in our documentary, Leaving California, The Untold Story. We're going to leave you a link below in the comments. Make sure to click on this link and watch this documentary and let us know what you think. Now let's go back to the opinion.
They always go after meal and rest periods, rest and recovery periods, didn't pay accurate wages, but that's not what they're after. They're after their employee wage statement, which is under Labor Code Section 226. And if you look at that, there's 9 items. You have to have a specific way you do a Social Security number or the last 4 numbers. You have to have a specific date. I had an employer one time, they paid every single week, 20 years in business. The employees never went without a paycheck, always got paid the correct wages. But because on their paycheck stub, it said week ending 7/1, week ending 7/8, like every 7 days. But the law says you have to have inclusive dates, 7/1 to 7/8. That was an infraction, and it cost that employer over $1 million. And there was no harm to the employee. That's the other thing. When you go to court, only the litigated employer, the employee, and the plaintiff piece and the attorney are claiming all these bad things against the employer. And then the judge will go, well, there's no harm. You know, they got their paycheck. They've never gone without wages. They got the accurate wages. And then, but the penalty phase where the penalties are assessed, which is $50 for every infraction, $100 for the second infraction. And you might have 3 infractions on one wage statement because of periods, commas, dashes, a P.O. box versus a physical address, just those little things like that. You might have 3 infractions. And if you have 100 employees or 200 employees, that adds up very quickly. You have all of that going on, and the penalty phase, even though there was no harm to the employee, the penalty stands and the judge has no discretion over it. We track these lawsuits every day. I don't know if you can see this, but every day, these are the lawsuits. This is one day filed in the state of California. And every day I get an email, and this is only, each one of these things is one lawsuit. So this attorney tracks all these lawsuits that are going on in the state of California. You've got lawsuits for reimbursement of electricity rates when you provide somebody with a company phone and they charge their phone at home. You provide somebody, an employee, with a company truck, and they take pride in that truck, and on their way home, they stop at the car wash or they get with their kids and they wash the truck on Saturday morning. It's a violation of the labor code because you have to pay them to maintain, to wash your vehicle. So they quit issuing company vehicles. Now you just drive your own car to the yard and pick stuff up. It's just absurd how they are deteriorating the relationship between the employer and the employee. And if you, another asset that we have is cabia.com. If you go to cabia or cabia.com, cabia.com, and there's 3 little bars when the web page comes up, and you tap on those 3 little bars and you go to PAGA data, it gives you every claim in the state of California, and there are hundreds of thousands of claims filed. And like I said, billions of dollars have been paid out since 2004 because it goes back retroactively for 4 years. Even though it's a new case and it just happened, they will go after penalties retroactively for every paycheck you've ever issued on every payday retroactively for 4 years. It's absurd. It really is. And it's a detriment to the state and jobs in the state. So we have introduced several pieces of legislation like a right to cure. So if there's no harm to the employee and you have a P.O. box versus a physical address, let them change it and put their physical address or their P.O. box, whatever the correct it has to be sourced to a document. So whether it's filed to the Secretary of State's office or your tax returns, things like that. And most employers don't think about these things. So we asked for a right to cure. Give them an opportunity to cure this. Now, I'm not saying if you stole wages for an employee, you can't cure that. That's irresponsible as the responsibility that you have to be an ethical employer in the state of California. But let's just say you used a P.O. box because your mailing address is a P.O. box, but your physical address is 912th Street. And the Secretary of State has 912th Street, but on your paycheck stub, it says P.O. box. Let them fix that. A right to cure. Democrats killed it. They didn't want anything about it because these PAGA attorneys are very big contributors to individuals that support these causes. And if you think about it, the law to me is unconstitutional because the Attorney General of the state of California is duly elected as a constitutional officer. And now you have all these thousands of deputized attorney generals just out there blatantly filing lawsuits, every single day. So we introduced several pieces of legislation, the right to cure, to eliminate PAGA altogether. We've tried a ballot measure. I think there's an existing ballot measure that like the chamber and the retailers and the Restaurants Association and everybody is trying to get behind. Because like I said, nobody is advocating for a bad employer not to pay an employee. But we have got to stop these PAGA attorneys from swooping in and making millions upon millions of dollars at the expense of lost jobs in the state of California for employees who really aren't interested in filing a lawsuit. And the way it works also, too, you have to opt out. So everybody is automatically in unless you write a letter to opt out. And most employees don't understand that. We have employees come into us, go, I don't want to be a part of this. And they only give you a certain amount of time to opt out. And if you don't, then you're automatically in. It's a mess. So we are doing some things to try to fix it. But again, we're in Sacramento and we have to work with people who don't believe that this is a problem. Find out the information on the ballot measure and I can tell you that honestly, as many lawsuits that have been filed in the state under PAGA, I think just about every employer in the state an employee has had some type of touch or effect with PAGA. And I think that this is definitely something that we need to stop so that jobs can continue to thrive.
Do you agree with this opinion? Let us know what you think in the comments. And don't forget to watch our documentary. The link is below.